Welcome to another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials, where we help you accelerate your career and turn soft skills into hard money by mining gold from project failures, bringing insights from ecosystem experts and inspiration from others on the trail. Now joining us with over 20 years in the ecosystem, please welcome our host, Jon Cline.
All right, welcome everyone. Another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials. And today we have Mike Mikula joining us as a guest. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, good to see you. How you doing?
Great. We all feel a lot cooler now. You know what I mean?
Cooler.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure you've never heard
never heard that one.
Never heard that one.
that. So Eric, what's new?
Well, first, I want to welcome Mike. I met Mike about 4 months ago, and I've been thinking about him ever since. I know you guys work together, but Mike comes to us with lots of background in AI and Cursor and is a figure out tinkerer kind of guy. So welcome to the call and excited to have you in the Salesforce community and working with Jon.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. What's new with me? Gosh, man, time flies. I can't believe it's June. Let's date the episode. Won't say what year it is. So what's new? I'm getting ready for PTO vacation coming up. That's gonna be great. In the meantime, though, customer meetings, lots of learning on, everything I can. Team's really busy at work. So like work is definitely primary or top of mind. And a little mountain biking on the sides and the weekends. The weather's perfect right now, 75 degrees and not humid, and everybody's healthy and happy, so things are good.
Nice. I don't think I knew that you were into mountain biking. That's pretty cool.
I really got much more interested. I've had one for since I was 15, but about in November last year, I found an amazing deal on an electric mountain bike.
Okay.
And I live right near a state park. And so if I go down my street, make a left, and go up a left on the next street, I hit a trailhead. And I have this mountain bike just expands the range of where I can go. There's some super steep climbs. The other day, I did 2,000 vertical feet in an hour on a mountain bike up a fire road, nonstop.
Gotta
It
love
was
that battery.
amazing.
That battery, dude, just makes it amazing, right?
It is. And I have to say, this is not a throttle mountain bike. This is a pedal assist. So I have to be pedaling the whole time. Yes, of course, it's much easier. And the point is to get me outside. And I'm getting outside. And I can, definitely, I feel the exercise and I'm sore the next day. So it either says something about me or says
I
something about
like it.
So
I
it's
like
good.
it. Wow. Good stuff. What's new in your world, Mike?
Well, I finally finished that Agentforce implementation, so that was nice.
Congrats.
I worked way too hard in April, and I had to kind of recover in May, so that's kind of why you didn't see me as much, or I was being really protective of my time.
Sure.
But I'm starting to feel better, starting to like have more time to do fun things again. But yeah, just honestly, just digging into every area I can, pushing Cursor. I mean, Cursor is now the ambassador program's public.
Mhm.
So that pilot I set with them, like we've got plenty of people hosting things all over the world. Super exciting.
So what is the ambassador? So Cursor, as people may not know, may know, who doesn't know these days, but if you're catching up, it's an AI-driven IDE that's general purpose, right?
It's built off of VS Code, right?
Okay.
And then that's the base like underpinning. But yeah. And then
And
they've
then
got
what
their
is
own
the
AI.
ambassador program?
And I just want to say one more thing. It's like,
Yeah.
so like it's not only just the IDE, they have their own infrastructure in the cloud that processes all your data for you, right? So it's building rags and everything to give you the best request back based on your context of
Cool.
your code base. But
Cool.
the ambassador program, so the main purpose of it is to kind of be a middle ground between the community and the dev team, right? So we're kind of like the advocates of the product. We're looking at all of the feedback from the community and we're trying to make sure everyone feels heard to help make the best decisions for everything that's happening with the product.
Cool. So is it fair to say in Salesforce terms, you're kind of like the golden hoodie MVPs of the Cursor world? They love having you. They keep you close. You've done great things with the Cursor platform. And so they're actually trusting you to be voices from dev out to the cursor dev
Yeah.
community?
Yeah, like for example, I just spoke at React Summit the other day, did a full demo of like what you can do with Cursor building full stack apps, and that's definitely they advocate for us to be doing
Awesome.
things like that.
Cool.
No, that's cool. Very nice.
Thank
Well,
you.
congrats. You don't have to be incognito anymore. It's hard to be a double
Yeah,
agent,
under the radar.
right?
Well, and I mean, I generally just liked helping people. Like I showed 50 people how to use Cursor before I was an ambassador, right? Like I just liked using their product. I was spending a lot of money. And for private contract work, like I still spend money on it. They only pay for my public stuff, the stuff that's
Right.
shared
Sure.
with them. So
Right.
Yeah, that's how
I
we
need a
met. I
pro.
mean, he invited me to make the snake game with
the
Cursor.
snake game,
Yeah, and so that's I took you up on your offer. That was fun.
That's
he did the
awesome. What
Cursor, and
about
then
you?
and then he found the Cline.
Exactly.
What is the Cline?
So a client is essentially instead of having a fork of VS Code, it's just an extension in VS Code, but it's the same
Mhm.
thing. It's very similar. They don't do some of the additional stack additions that Mike highlighted, so they just take a slightly different approach. But it stands for CLI and editor. So Cline, I'm biased to the spelling, of course.
Uh-huh,
But
uh-huh.
it just, yeah, it operates in VS Code, same thing. I like it also because I use it has an kind of an act versus plan mode, so you can plan stuff out even if you don't actually intend to use Cline for the actual execution of a lot of it. It can help you as a thought partner and kind of processing. So yeah, it's great because because it's on your computer, it interfaces on my Linux computer with all of my command line utilities. So whether that's Git or any programming language, anything that's going on locally on my computer, Cline will alternate between going between the cloud as well as back to my computer. I think Cursor can do the same thing. So it's a fascinating thing to watch as it, kind of does things, then checks things into the repository, and then compares them, and then diffs them, and then tries to run it locally, checks the error logs, runs it again. It's quite a fascinating thing to watch for anybody who hasn't used kind of a co-pilot before. Find a fun little project to do that doesn't, hurt anything, and it is quite amazing to watch.
Absolutely. I haven't done it myself yet. My brother's been working with LLMs for a year now, and he's recently been using it as a thought partner, basically telling it to do his, scoping of a project. What are the steps to build out the project? Letting it run for an hour, come back and check it, review it, approve it, and just move forward. And this is a professional programmer, and it's um, amazing to think. And he has an MBA. He got an engineering degree. He became a product manager. He's been programming for years. I got him to use an IDE starting last year. I don't know what he was using
Was
before.
using Notepad
I
before?
don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Sorry, Scott, if you're listening, but I know that I showed him an IDE, and maybe it's 2 years ago. I said, seriously, you got to check it out. So he was doing a bunch of Python work, or I don't know what it was. So, but his day job is as a business broker. He helps do due diligence to find companies or to put companies up for market who want to be sold, like a small software development company. He will get them sold or purchased by somebody else with his team of partners. So a lot of his job is business on the phone, but then he's got to dip into programming sometimes because that's what's fun and it's a tool for work. He's building a really cool tool for work. And he was saying to me something I didn't realize, and I would love both of your opinions. He really has a hard time context switching between being the programmer and being the business person. But it's way easier to context switch between being the LLM operator or the cursor operator who does the programming versus your business calls where you're maybe, in your case, John, doing requirements. So, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can totally see that being the case. And what are your thoughts on that? Do you see does your life, is it any different now that you're context switching between working in cursor versus business versus working in code versus business? Is it the same?
Me personally, when I have more agency, I mean, this has been true in my career always, right? As I became more senior, the more agency I have over the problem and solution, the faster I get it done. Like even like that was one of my super skills early in my career when I found out like instead of just taking all the tickets and just doing them, let me just actually get to know these people and how they work and like think about how to do their jobs. And if I was in their job, like how I would do it, I can build 10 times faster a better solution than just going through the game of telephone. So
Yeah.
when I can do that with Cursor, right? Like I have all the context I need, I can just jam and build a whole solution.
Is that because you, when you say the context, are you saying you feel inspired because you know there's a human behind this and you know you're helping them and how they're helping them, and so that drives you to stay focused? Or are you saying there's something about Cursor that's informing
Both.
you or inspiring you?
It's both.
Okay.
I enjoy the result of how it impacts the person, and I feel like I'm gambling when I'm to some degree, like when I'm rolling the dice with AI and seeing how far I can push it. But it's like it's skill gaming, not just like pure.
Random.
Right.
Yeah. But to your point, your question of I think Mike's point is a really good one, which is right, like especially it's kind of an architect's perspective, which is I want to go upstream, right? I don't want to just take the eddies off of the river here. I want to go up to the head of the river and figure out what's really happening here, so I can then impact all these downstream things and cut it off earlier and just have a better solution. And so certainly there are aspects where having AI as a thought partner, having AI as a tool that you can direct really empowers that process. But your point of oscillating between kind of being an in the weeds developer versus a delegator, systems of thinking focused person, and then moving back to kind of working on the business, not just in the business, to me, it definitely makes a lot of sense because there's not as much kind of what's the scaffolding, if you will, to have to offload if I'm not down in the weeds thinking about syntax and methods and all of these elements. Because when I'm telling AI what to do, I'm telling it outcomes and sometimes a specific paradigm or process, but I'm not telling it syntax.
Mhm.
I'm not telling it like I want you to use X method versus Y method usually. And so my thought process is more like I'm talking to AI on the phone and I'm telling it what I want and how I'm going to recognize, when I see it, what
Mhm.
it should do.
Mhm.
It makes sense to me that he would have an easier time doing that,
And I
which
know myself, and you guys probably relate. I think I'm not unusual in saying this, but like if I'm going to do a programming project, I really want at least 2 to 4 hours untouched. I need to get in the zone. And if I only have an hour available, it's not even worth it for me to just start because there's just too much scaffolding to build up to get my thoughts organized until I'm
Well, and
operating
you
at.
don't get the ROI, right? Because like when you get in the zone a little bit, that's the ROI. Like that's the flow you feel, and then you're like, hey, I really made some headway there. And if you're not able to do that,
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of like saying if you're gonna play like your favorite game, but you can only play for 20 minutes, you're like, well, I'll just wait until I can
Yeah,
play for
yeah,
a couple hours, you know?
yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
that's really, oh, sorry. I was gonna say that's really what happened for me is
mhm.
it became like a video game.
That's
And
exciting.
and, and it's become one of my favorite video games.
That's
Right. It's a very
amazing.
creative process. It's very accelerated. Um, but let's talk. So when I was so over my last couple weeks, I was at Texas Dreamin' and then Tahoe Dreamin' before that. I got to speak twice at each, which was super fun, and also got to just connect a little deeper with some of these tools that are continuing to mature. So now, across these two events, right? There's tools that are not necessarily down at the code level like Cursor, but who are now trying to really augment and support I'd say kind of the not just the admin side, right? So certainly handling some admin tasks, but really trying to extract and mine from the orgs things that people should be paying attention to and are really difficult to kind of ascertain and assess because they deal with so much metadata that spans so many different elements. So, everything from so some of the organizations are like Sweep is one, Octar is another one. There's Cluebot.
These are all Salesforce related tools.
These are all Salesforce related. There's another one, I believe it's called Bristle. and Metazoa. So they're all just, they kind of have a slightly different take on, just kind of what they're focusing on. But I just thought it was great because some of them, like Octar and Cluebot, for example, are not so much focused on what you're doing inside the org, but rather how are we helping you be a thought partner, contemporaneously manage your artifacts and your stories and your documents, making sure that we're covering gaps based on when the client says something. Is that a commitment? Does that commitment require research and investigation? Do we need to circle back? Do I need to document that in a specific place? They essentially have Okta, for example, will have an agent that can join a call like this. If I'm talking with a client, there's a discovery call. I have a set of agenda items that I was supposed to tackle. It's listening in and it's connected to my documents and essentially a custom data graph about what my company does and how they do it, formatting, style, components. For example, I always have people first dimensions in all of our artifacts. And so it's listening to see like, oh yeah, okay, so that's one of the requirements we should be discussing here. And it might go and add some notes to that particular section. So rather having a separate, summary of my particular meeting, it's actually going to the origin of that from a traceability standpoint and updating it and adding some additional detail, which I
How
thought
do you
was really
spell
clever.
Octar?
Auctor. I believe it's a Latin word. Octor.
Okay. T-O-R, Octar.
Yeah. So these
So
guys were sponsors. Yeah, it was just interesting to see the maturity and growth of these products, really, even over the last 6 months.
I think it's super cool. I love hearing about these new tools. I saw Sweep. That's pretty cool. I just looked it
Sweep
up
does
right
a lot
now.
of stuff. I didn't realize how significant it is. They also not only do they help admins out, but they have like a lead assignment engine that leverages AI and other
Yeah,
things, and they have some other components that kind of add on to Salesforce to overcome some common kind of shortcomings.
cool.
Yeah, it's very very cool. And so one of my sessions was on people first power in the age of AI,
Mhm.
which is where I'm curious about your guys' perspective. The encouragement was since these tools are coming in, if we think about our role as like a building, right, that has many floors, some of which we're not quite living in yet,
Okay.
AI is coming in and moving into the basement and
Mhm.
probably will take the first floor.
Yeah.
And many people may have been getting away with living in the basement or the first floor of their role just because the client
Mhm.
didn't know as much as they do. And so it was good enough.
Yeah.
Well, now AI is coming and occupying that space. And so we have to think of, we be encouraged to occupy the higher floors of our role and really be more engaged, more present, and more valuable. That was one aspect I spoke about. The second was thinking of, the five most common negative dimensions of AI are things like plagiarism, Machiavellianism, being sycophantic, like just telling you what you want to hear, not being as adaptable as a person, and also not handling complexity in the same way that a person does. And my point was, if you had a teammate who was Machiavellian, meaning the ends justify the means, and they gave you a great story that you put in your slide deck and you went and tried to sell a deal, and then it was exposed in the meeting that that was all a lie, would you ever work with that person again? Probably not, right? And so with thinking about all the ways that we're being pressured to bring AI in a much larger measure into our lives, if we don't know about RAG data and guardrails and the citation limitations and other things that we can put in to protect ourselves, then we run the risk of bringing in one of those teammates into our project.
Hmm.
The good thing to be careful about. That was the second point of that.
Did you have action items to remediate those risks, or what do people do about the Machiavellian? You just have to know about it.
Well, I think being cognizant of it is the first part, and then recognizing that, okay, those, when you have really good grounding data, for example, those things diminish in a much more significant way. Or if you're using tools like Cline or like Cursor, right, you can set up kind of framework rules
Hmm.
that keep things a little bit more in bounds.
Yeah.
But I think it just depends on product by product. So for example, one of the examples I gave was People will sometimes think, hey, I have an AI listener, note taker in my meeting. Do I really need to be there? And my point to them, I said, okay, well, maybe not. Let's ask. Can you anybody highlight an example of what's invisible to AI in those meetings? And they got back and they're like, well, I've not really thought about that. Because it's capturing the words that people say, true. But what are some things it's not capturing? Is it capturing facial expressions when someone asks a question? Sometimes those are valuable. Is
Yeah.
it capturing when people interrupt each other and won't let them finish their sentences? Could be a power struggle, could
Hmm.
be a political challenge later on.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is it capturing who's at the meeting but never said anything?
Hmm.
Is it capturing tone of voice when someone is maybe a little bit concerned or sounds like they're trying to speak in an obfuscated way because there might be
He's
some other
trepidation for some
political
reason.
dilemma going on?
Right.
I mean, we could go
I
on and
feel
on.
like I feel like you just hit one thing that's really interesting to me personally. Nobody likes feedback loops from a manager, the one-on-one, or if it's especially if it's done poorly in public in front of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an opportunity for AI to plug into all those conversations and give you a personal feedback loop
Mm.
to make you
That's
think about some
interesting.
of the things that you might not feel comfortable hearing from a person.
Mm-hmm. That's
Like
interesting.
being it like interrupting somebody.
Yeah. I wonder, certainly, I think it's important for any of us as we mature to be able to take feedback from people. And I personally would probably not, I think feedback from AI on the empirical side, like the volume of conversation, your words occupied 85% of that conversation versus someone else at 15%. I'd probably welcome feedback from AI on that point, which tools like Gong provide. But
And
more
Salesforce Einstein
subjective,
Conversation Insights.
yeah. Say again?
Salesforce Einstein Conversation Insights.
Yeah, provides similar
Yeah.
detail.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, thanks for the plug.
Yeah.
But I don't know how welcome subjective feedback from AI would be for me. What do you think?
What if you told it was like you play the role of an expert executive coach who has coached the likes of Steve Jobs and others? What is your feedback on my presentation? Like, would that not be coached but subjective?
Like even without grounding it, I've even with just ChatGPT 4.0, not even the more advanced models, I've had it process letters and things that people have said, and it was spot on about like mental
Hmm.
health behaviors that like I know from experience of understanding people and relationships, and I was just like, that's really interesting. It got that right.
Hmm.
Not saying people should stop doing therapy or stop having coaches or any of that other stuff, but like it's just another feedback loop to test the way you think against something, bouncing
Hmm.
off the wall.
Yeah,
An
and
assistant.
it's augmenting you, right? It's not automating you. So
Because
I'm definitely a fan of that.
sorry, the excitement in my thoughts is like we've all worked for bad managers. So even though we could say from a people first mentality, like people should talk to people about people problems, but I'm going to tell you, I've talked to managers, I didn't know how to talk to them.
Hmm.
And it's cost me careers, it's cost me like forward movement, it's you know, it
Hmm.
cost me
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And then especially if I didn't know how to talk to someone who's a bad manager
Yeah.
and how to work around that scenario.
Totally.
Hmm.
Totally. I've had that experience too. My only after the fact can I figure out that I thought I told them what I needed to tell them to make change happen, but change didn't happen. And it's because either my problem was not a big problem, or I didn't tell them in a way that made them realize what my problem was. My problem was when I was a developer, I kept getting asked, "Hey, when are you gonna get this code done?" Pretty soon. I should have it done by Tuesday. I've got a couple bugs. It's Friday, Eric. When's this project gonna be done? Still Tuesday, but I got a couple bugs. I really can't fix them. Monday, Eric, is the project going to be done by Tuesday? I think so. I'm so close. I've got it all written out. I just have this one bug that's not, I can't resolve it. I have to do UAT on Tuesday, and I do the UAT because I took that as the priority, not successful UAT as the priority. So I hit the deadline, but we totally did not pass UAT. I was thought I was telling my boss what enough of a warning, and I guess I wanted my boss to say, oh, we should push this out. But my boss was like, no, you tell me. And I didn't know I wasn't saying the right thing.
Wow.
So, and luckily he was cool about it, but it was definitely a very strong learning moment.
Wow.
That's big.
Well, what about so let's think about there's some things I'm sure people have heard in the news this week. What do you think about the Builder.ai story?
What's
It's so over talked about, but
uh,
in my opinion, but
It's
I
noteworthy
think
on a variety of fronts.
it's I'm sick of it because it's highlighting exactly what I thought would happen with the dot-com boom and crash.
oh
There's
yeah.
going to be companies
This is the
that are,
story where a company said it was an AI company, but it was just 700 engineers in India.
Yes.
Okay.
and there was pieces of it that used AI and
Okay.
so forth, but like the amount of it's just classic riding a wave, right?
Right. It's bubble
And
activity.
it's just happened so many times in history with technology and new booms of things that people don't fully understand.
Yeah.
I knew this would happen. Called
Right.
it. I
I
actually
mean,
have a
look,
post that I did
6 years they maintained this ruse, even to a 450+ million investment from Microsoft.
because,
That's what's noteworthy to me is the fact that they were able to maintain it for so long.
but 2 years ago, I worked for an AI company that most people didn't understand what AI was,
Yeah.
right? So you could get away with a lot of
Sure.
stuff, but now people are catching on because they've made some bad investments,
Yeah.
right? Very quickly, or they're learning. They have all these tools now at their disposal to learn more about these things than they ever could before.
And there's also a conflict of interest for any investor who's already in. They may want to get out, but they have to keep the ruse up so they can get out at the price they bought in at or better. And
Mhm.
so it's to nobody's advantage who's an investor to reveal the fraud. And this
Yeah,
is Theranos, but for AI. Theranos was faking results. These guys were making results, but it wasn't done the way they said they were doing it.
yeah.
Hmm.
Sorry, my initial feelings are just because I see so many people that tag things in the news, like the Informatica. Oh my God, I feel like every person on my network had to at least reshare that purchase. But like I get it, like it's interesting. It's an interesting decision, but like who's got the most interesting opinion on it?
Mhm.
That's the thing I'm still trying to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that was news to me too. Obviously, we don't know these things are going to happen inside Salesforce when they happen.
So anyway, sorry, that's just my
No worries.
personal.
What else did you guys discover this week
Do you have any, Mike? I
or in the
got
last couple weeks?
Well, so Anthropic's CEO dropped another bomb on like everyone's gonna never need. There's no programming anymore within the next year, right? And just kind of every news company latching onto his words with programming, and I just feel like these are just dangerous comments that are being put out there.
Hmm.
even Mark Benioff said that, and I think people. I listened to this podcast. I forget which one it was, but they were saying, yeah, even Mark Benioff said they we weren't going to hire developers anymore back in like Q1 or end of Q4, and there's still developer openings on our careers site. So, and like I talked about my brother being a programmer, and we could talk about you guys too. Who the heck is going to be a solution architect if there's no programmers?
And put it this way, like I'll be honest, like I haven't had to really write code for like the last year, but I'm still looking at all the code that AI is writing, and I'm still like, depending on what my goal is it a prototype or is it something I'm rolling to prod? And
Yeah,
I'm still thinking with all the systems of knowledge and rigorous iterations I've been through to do that stuff.
yeah.
I don't know.
Or maybe what's happening. So the the press needs to print and sell ads. So this is great content for them. But this is sort of like, I mean, it's a little bit like people used to write machine code, then people made higher level languages, and you didn't have to do that anymore. I don't have to know the memory addresses anymore or use go-to statements or load data sections, whatever we used to do to write machine code. But I still have to solve a problem with my tool set. Now maybe the tool set is generating the code for us. I still have to be the problem solver. So maybe we don't call them programmers anymore, or maybe a programmer now is more formally a problem solver and a technical problem solver, but and maybe they're more productive per hour in lines of code. That's probably true.
You just hit a nail on the head. So I've described it the same way, like the abstractions in engineering, like going from hardware to software. Like when software came out, it didn't end all the hardware engineers' jobs. Some of the highest paid engineers were probably hardware engineers right now working for NVIDIA,
Yeah,
building their
totally.
hardware. But the responsibilities of where certain things live changed at that abstraction. Just like when object-oriented programming came out, and then frameworks, and then the metadata. I mean, gosh, Salesforce really crushed the game with all their
Yeah,
metadata generated architecture.
yeah,
And it wouldn't be surprising if we start seeing a relationship more with metadata and AI, with that abstraction in itself being with less hallucinations.
yeah, yeah.
So just a
Well,
thought, like who's going to still program that abstraction? Like I could still see programmers building metadata infrastructure for AI to consume.
Like
yeah.
that's what MCP and A to A are, right? Like for agent to agent integration. I don't know much about it, but to me that's it's a
Well,
direct
I
way.
think somebody has explained it to me in kind of three ways, where there's an element of there's how to do it, which is like the programming element. There's the what to do, which is kind of the design aspect. And then above it is the why to do it. And there's an aspect where AI is definitely helping on the what to do, or rather the how to do, right? Where it's like, oh, it's going to help you understand what's the right language to use, what's the syntax within that language to use, and in a little bit of the what to do as you're evaluating back and forth trade-offs, things like that. The why to do it probably has a lot less AI impact because there's just a lot of other timing, people, acumen, business cycle, marketplace. Like there's a lot of other things there. So I think that the benefit here is back to the building analogy, right? Like we're able to move people out of the basement first floor of the how to do more into the what to do and even more into the
Mhm.
why to do it or why not to do it or why to do it when versus, this other time. That we
Right.
can think more and spend more effort on those aspects, which really should lead to higher quality products.
Yeah.
It should lead to better adoption because we're able to take more change management concerns into place. We're able to think more clearly about how can we make sure that the promise for Salesforce, for example, of not demanding the customer change because of the software, but
Right.
actually making the software bespoke so that it gives the customer, both the first and second, the internal users, as well as the end customer, what they want. To me,
Yeah.
that's an exciting direction. And that doesn't eliminate roles,
Right.
especially if people are willing to mature their own competence.
Right. There's one other thing that happens when you just trust the build to AI. If you rebuild it again, it rebuilds it from scratch. So where you might have learned how to not do a certain architecture or a certain approach, or don't write an Apex class in this way, those are simplistic examples. But it's not like your AI system that you're working with. Tell me if I'm wrong, Mike, with Cursor or with Cline. But after you've worked on 7 projects and you come back to a project again that is yet again another way to, I don't know, solve problem A, if you ask, it sort of re-engineers the solution from scratch again, doesn't it?
No, not anymore.
Okay,
So
tell me
so
more.
so Cursor has a beta feature now for memories. So
Uh-huh.
as you're working on stuff, it stores these memories and then you can use them as rules.
Wow.
And then you have rules per project with
Uh-huh.
different criteria on how they work. And that's how you get it to be consistent every time you come back to it.
Cool. Okay, awesome. That's coming. That's awesome.
And then
Hey,
Cursor also has like they just announced this with their 1.0 release this week, a bug bot that can join your GitHub account and then kind of like Codex where it just fixes stuff autonomously. And then they also have a background agent that runs in a VM that can work side by side with you in parallel while you're building stuff.
wow,
So
Cool.
that's interesting. Well, the other aspect, which I think is a great use case for those who haven't used copilots like this, is you can, let's say you inherit an org and you download all the metadata and there's a bunch of Visual Force, Lightning Web Components, and you're like, of course, the majority of these projects, there's no solution design doc, there's no anything. So you drop that all into a folder, and then you just ask and say, hey, look, I want to work on this folder. Help me understand what's going on here. And it'll go through all the files, it'll find all the connected methods, all the references, everything, and it'll give you a summary and say, okay, looks like we got this. Here's what we have. These records get created here. These records get updated. I got 3 events here. There's no delete element here. This one restricts that. And it gives you a picture of all the things that you currently have in that code. And then you can quickly go and you can refactor one of those and say, okay, great, let's convert that Visual Force page over to a Lightning Web Component, or, let's take it up to API version, 52. That's a great place to start on existing code, and you can watch as it gives you insight
Right,
much
right.
faster into what that data set really includes, and you can modify that, not having to start from scratch. Sometimes if it finds a bug loop and it's not able to solve it, it'll then go way back and sometimes start again and say, let me just rewrite this page because I've something happened. But
Hmm.
that can also happen because I'm not watching it, as
Hmm.
Mike was talking about. It's showing me all the diffs and everything that it's making. I might need to reject some of those and be like, no, dude, you're changing framework code. We can't do that, right? And I
And
just reject it.
typically when I'm building stuff, I'll have it make a checklist. So as an engineer, I can think I'll actually tell it to put instructions in the checklist to stop, depending on the level of complexity that that checklist is. And I tell it to write notes for each checklist item. So if I start new chats for context pruning per subject of that checklist, it has memory of everything that it's worked on as I continue working through that problem. But like when I worked on my resume site just like 2 weeks ago, I added an AI chat so that the chat's trained on my resume. This was never part of the app before, but there's a certain way you can add new modules to my resume because it's like a Windows 95 app. It was able to read through how all the other apps were, follow my checklist, and then build an entire AI chat in my resume, fully integrated. It came into an existing project, understood how things were being built, and built it following that framework.
Wow, amazing.
So these things can be guided and structured, but this is a new way of thinking, right? Like you're abstracting some of the things that you were just kind of doing as an engineer and then figuring out how to train someone else to do it.
Yeah, cool, cool.
So, sorry, I don't mean to just totally blind. I'm just like this is I do this too much. So this is
This is when John and
it's
I
my
hang out
domain.
together on a random Friday with no agenda. This is what it feels like. And it's, he says something that stimulates me. We said something that got you going. You're saying something that gets us going. Hopefully somebody who's listening is also excited. So it's awesome.
Yeah. My energy goes whoosh. I came in this thing pretty hot, like pretty mellow, and now I'm like,
Uh-huh. You lit up. That's right.
let's go for a run now. Get some exercise.
But I want to talk about some sample projects here. I love getting smart people in the same room, and I think that's what people love hearing as well. So, Eric, you had mentioned some Agentforce, some things you learned over the past couple weeks.
Yeah, so plug for Trailhead. I and my whole team had to do the Agent Blazer Champion and Trail and Innovator series. It's like, it's 10 hours of Trailhead content. But by the end of those two badges, Champion and Innovator, you will have configured a customer service agent, a sales coach agent, an SDR, sales, lead development agent, and you will have also gotten some public frameworks on agentic maturity, agentic readiness for your organization, and be more familiar with the whole topic, action, instruction-based capabilities of what's an agent builder. So that is a significant, cool piece of learning, even said from somebody from the inside of Salesforce. Nobody trains me at Salesforce. We have to go through trailheads also. And we do have access to product management. But they are so busy, like we have to train ourselves first before we ask them smarter questions. So plug for that. And the second thing is, I knew there was a thing called Testing Center, and I knew it could be used for testing agents, but I never really played with it. And I did some deep diving, and I found out, and I missed this at TDX, there was a command line interface to batch testing agents back in TDX that you could define a testing, a case for an agent or multiple cases. You could have it generate. It was basically an API interface to Testing Center before we released Testing Center.
Hmm.
So that exists. So you could command line batch test your agents from Cursor or, VS Studio. But then also, I had a customer asking me, they were very concerned about if I build an agent today and it's working, how can I prove that in 3 months or 6 months, it's still working as well? And there's a couple tools. One is out already. So in Testing Center, you can go create a batch test of your agent and you can upload your own CSV of test utterances that you'd be setting into your agent, and also the expected topic and actions that will be executed.
Hmm.
Or you can have it generated for you. And I don't know if it's out yet, but there's a feature coming that's even going to let you generate test cases based on real past chat utterances in your log data.
And prior
Prior
conversations.
conversations, yeah. So that's pretty cool. So now I've got my test. I run my test. What I learned this week and is that, I mean, how do you test an agent? Because the response an agent gives you might be different every single time,
Hmm.
just a little bit. So you can't do the normal deterministic testing alone, assertion testing, to make sure that agent, utterance one gave me response one.
Hmm.
It turns out, and this is new to me as of yesterday, so Mike and John, you probably have all been through this already, but we do objective testing. So we do assertion testing on those test results. Was the right topic found for this utterance, and was the right action found for this utterance? And then, based on the response that was provided, we do a subjective test judgment using an LLM. So when the response comes back from the agent, and there's also an expected response that was provided in the testing data, an LLM decides if it's close enough to be passing or failing.
Interesting.
And I love that
That's the
there's
ultimate fuzzy math right there.
right. And
Yes.
so, you can go look at those. And it turns out there's even more than just accuracy that you can evaluate. You can evaluate when you build the batch test, you can check boxes that show that you can maybe do conciseness. Is my response concise? Is there latency? Was the latency acceptable of my test instance? So all these things are in Testing Center, as far as I know, safe harbor. I think those features are all GA. And that's super cool. And so what it was important for me was this came together because I was trying to solve the problem for a customer about how to verify that 6 months later my agent is still operating well. One is just go run that same test again and compare it to your previously downloaded results, and you'll be able to know if any utterances changed in their performance. No, that was it. That was just like the guy had a compliance concern. Their insurance company, and they were worried about that. So I was just super excited to put that together. However, now coming to you guys who actually implement agents in real life, because I'm pre-sales. You guys are real life agent wranglers. How do you guys test agents? What do you think of Testing Center if you've used it? And what's the best thing you've ever seen?
So I didn't use Testing Center.
Okay.
Just
Would
I
you?
didn't even know. The agent that I built was an Apex, essentially like an Apex API through invocable Apex. And then there's instructions. So I used Cursor to generate all the instructions for a search engine essentially that had four grounded parameters. And then the agent action took those grounded parameters to the topic for its instructions. All of that was all generated by Cursor. So Cursor controlled the instructions, the code, all that. And then I also built Cursor built anonymous Apex that it would run to see based on the sample data I had in the org that I trained it on, if
Yeah.
it could find that data with the grounded parameters it had access to.
Yeah.
So then if all that worked, then I would have a chat and I would just share that chat back to Cursor, and then it would update the instructions or the code based on how it was performing.
A chat back
What
to
which
Cursor, is that how you interact with Cursor as a developer? Is that what you mean to chat back to Cursor?
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So like they just have like their own prompt window
Yeah.
that controls all the files that it has access to, or MCPs or terminal, right? It's a reflection agent. So what you were describing earlier with evaluations, I just sent you a link to agent recipes. So the evaluator pattern is 100% a pattern that people use as part of their agent workflow,
Hmm.
whether it's, sorry, agent workflows or autonomous agents. And what you just heard me describe was kind of being a human in the loop as part of the evaluation pattern.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also built workflow agents where I've built in evaluator patterns where it's like I have an LLM that returns a JSON, and then I have it go into TypeScript, and depending on how far off it is, there could be a routing agent that brings it to some other prompts for how it evaluates it and fixes it, and then returns back to the original process, and then we'll send that through the LLM again and see if it resolves into that typed file. and then you can evaluate the like you said the scoring of it with another LLM aside from just the structure.
Yeah. I think it's
But
been
that's
super
separate from
hard.
Salesforce. But I describe both, right? Outside of
Yeah.
Salesforce and in Salesforce.
Yeah. I didn't know anything besides talking to you today. And I heard from a consulting partner. I said, what do you guys do for testing? This is like 3 months ago. And he was like, yeah, we're kind of realizing that standard test automation tools, they don't, you need, you need something else to evaluate the subjective
Yeah,
return
the
response.
non-deterministic
Yeah, it's
element.
non-deterministic. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So anyways, go
it's good.
ahead.
Well, just to segue off of that,
Yeah.
so we one project that we've been working on is there's an off-platform tool called Crew AI,
Yeah.
and it has an open source set of tools. And we thought, what if we use Salesforce as a just a data source? Because people often want to connect to lots of other things. And so essentially the use case here was if I'm a salesperson, I have a bunch of kind of dead accounts and I haven't gotten in touch with for a bit. What if I were able to surface that account, confirm it, and then the agent would go into Salesforce, look at activity history, look at some specific, keywords and fields, custom fields on the object, on the account, on the contacts, look at some of their activities, maybe some of their preferences, bring that out, and then also maybe do a web search around their addresses, do a web search around their preferences, and highlight to say, for example, hey, it looks like you haven't talked to Joe here for about 8 months, but Joe really likes Western stuff and rodeos, and looks like over the next 60 days, there's a rodeo here at his location. You might consider asking him if he wants to join you. So essentially, it's kind of like an account warmer where it goes into Salesforce, but also goes to the web and uses some of these other tools
Cool.
to bring together something that, like in a Slack channel, that would give me some ideas on how I could re-engage with my client when I let them go cold.
Yeah, that's awesome. I
Uh,
love
and
go ahead.
we're using just the open source version of Crew AI, but they do have an enterprise version that speaks to what you're talking about, which is there's both a, kind of objective, subjective, and latency scores on how this agent is performing over time. And they have that built into their enterprise product. So essentially, it's kind of helping you track over time and chart it out how well how well it's working from an evaluator perspective, as well as like what latency looks like and how fast people are getting their answers.
Cool. Awesome. There's something coming, just to finish the thought. There's something called agent monitoring that's coming. So one thing is if you go to those test results in the test center, you can click on the down arrow on the far right side of any test utterance, and you can go look at the log data to see actually what happened in the agent log during the execution of that utterance. And that takes me over to the agent monitoring tool, which I don't think it's released yet, but it's basically letting you look at a conversation and look at the thread of not all utterances as a log, but just what are the utterances of the exact conversation
Hmm.
that was specific to one customer or one user interacting with the agent. And you can see what was happening on that agent and then look at the log data and you can see when it triggered toxicity or whatever the
Okay.
other thresholds that were in there. You can actually go in and
So
examine
you're providing
source.
visibility to like Einstein trust layer
Yeah,
flag.
yeah.
That's
So
clever.
yeah, it's cool. So thanks for
That's
letting me go
cool.
backwards on that one.
No, it's good stuff.
I
Well, we
feel like I
just
have a bunch of trailheads to take after Eric's earlier speech.
Yeah, don't we all always? Well, guys, it's been almost an hour,
Can't
and
believe it.
thanks everyone for staying with us. It's always worth my time.
Same
Any
here,
final
man.
thoughts before we sign off for today?
I would say, do something fun with your phone and AI. On my iPhone, it turns out when you send a text message, you can actually go to plus and then, oh, how do you get to it? Compose or something like that? Oh, you tap into this, and when you're text messaging, you can use AI to compose your texts. Click on writing tools when you tap into your thing, and you can say either rewrite my text message in a different tone, or proofread it, or make it friendly, or make it professional, or make it concise, or just tell it what you want to say. You go to compose and you say, I need you to write John a text that's really nice that tells him about how good he looks in this hat and that is really adding to his professionalism. And you hit go, and it's going to use OpenAI probably to generate your text message and then hit send. So in terms of wrapping AI into your day, I think that's a pretty fun one. I used it to invite people to my Cinco de Mayo party. Did I tell you the story already?
No.
Oh, I use it to invite people to my Cinco de Mayo party, and it was kind of a boring invitation. But before I sent it, I manually went over to ChatGPT and I said, "You are the most amazing Cinco de Mayo party hostess ever. Please rewrite this invitation to my friends to make it sound more fun and peppy than I did." And it started out with "Hola, amigos," and that was instead of like "Hi guys," it just changed it and it made some jokes and it was super fun. So it's almost like having a PR agent in your phone.
Yeah, oh, I love it. I've been using you guys see this here, the Minimal company phone.
What is
So
that?
this is like an e-ink
Okay,
screen,
yeah.
and which means that video and photos are like totally uninteresting. So
Uh-huh.
my goal is to have my phone be useful for what I need it to be useful for,
Telephony.
but motivate me for nothing more than what
Yes.
is
Keep you off the
actually,
apps.
yep, keeps you off the apps. Watching pickleball on my phone is now totally uninteresting. But what I do like is I like asking when I'm in the car and it's connected to Bluetooth. I love to learn in the car. And so rather than like listening to music, sometimes I'll say, "Hey, help me understand, how AI is being used in the medical field." And it'll go and it'll come up with something and it'll read it out loud over my stereo, right? And it's like having like a professor or someone who's really interesting. And I asked about all sorts of things, about history, about all this, and it just says it through my speakers in my car,
Yeah.
which is
Yep.
great.
That's a good one.
That's fun. Yeah, the only fun things I do is I like to have GPT generate like Windows 95 desktops with pixel art. That's my favorite way of communicating lately. Other than that, I did use it to plan out. I had it build a simple little app for planning out all the tables for my wedding.
Yeah.
I took our wedding list and I plugged all the data into it, and then it helped organize all the groups of people, and I was
That's
like able to
great.
just drag them. I'm like, this is the easiest wedding app manager, and it was like because otherwise I'd had to do it all in a spreadsheet, and I was having a
Yeah.
hard time visualizing it. So
Right.
Good
Wow.
job. Good job.
That's
That's a
pretty
good one.
cool. Did you have it like, sort it by, mix up the ages a little bit, mix up,
well, because I
have
had
people
like
organized
it.
by location?
Well, we had some data from like, was it friends or family and whose family it was from? So I
Uh-huh.
took that data, the people that also accepted, and was able to like set it up so that I could do groups of people that were that were part of a family. So I could just drag the whole group of family or drag individuals from that. It was pretty cool how fast it built this. I'm not gonna
Wow.
lie.
So
And
you
then I had
built
a
an app using AI to
yeah,
make a click and
And
draggable
visualize it.
sorting tool, a UI tool to create tables and drag people from a table, a chart, a grid
a
over
spreadsheet.
into a graph. Okay,
I
that's
took
fun.
the whole spreadsheet, pasted it into Cursor, told it what I was trying to do, and it built a whole visual app for me to just drag and
So,
drop.
see, this is so amazing because
That's
the how
insane.
to get it done is so inexpensive. This is actually another point that developer I was highlighting that talked about the how, the what, and the why. He
Yeah.
goes, the number one thing that developers will have to grow in is basically the cost of throwing it away, right?
Disposable software.
Yeah, they just have to get used to the idea that even though I did all of this, it's not really great. I'm going to start over. And they
And,
throw it
and
all away.
and just so you know, I did go to several sites to find wedding table planners, but none of them would just take my list the way it was. It wanted all this special formatting, and I was like, I don't want to do that. So
It's great. You were lazy enough to innovate, right?
Nice. You heard it here first. Have you filed a patent on this yet?
Right? Yeah, it's
oh, I shared it on my LinkedIn. It's just a silly thing. Then someone posted, "So, are you going to have AI write your vows?" It's like that is not allowed. That is not happening.
Are you gonna have AI write any songs for your ceremony? That's great. Well, good time, guys. I look forward to doing it again. If you're listening and you want to leave us a message, 540 trial 75. We love hearing from you. And thanks, guys. It's been great. We'll see you soon.
Love it.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials. If you found this episode valuable, we would love your help reaching others. Please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and share this with another who would benefit.